Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this newest episode of memoQ Talks. Today my guest is John O'Shea, Chair of Fit Europe, which stands for International Federation of Translators. And he's also a long-time legal translator and both a practitioner and a staunch advocate of the highest standard of education in translation and interpreting. LinkedIn lists you as a top technical translation voice. I was so intrigued to find this out just yesterday. And I will return to that in a question. So we are very, very honored to have you as a guest on memoQ Talks. And we are sitting here at memoQ's office in Budapest on the occasion that the conference of Fit Europe is underway just a few blocks away from the office. Before we continue, please do not forget to like this video, of course, only if you like it, and subscribe to the memoQ Talks channel. Also, be sure to check out our podcast on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. So, back to you, John. Your profile says that you have been helping international investors and other organizations with legal translations and negotiations in Greece and Cyprus. Your resume also says that you come from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and currently live in England. So please introduce yourself to us a bit. Tell us about this. Together with the introduction, where does your interest in Greece and the Greek language come from? And what came first, the legal degree or the passion about languages? So.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today, Balash. Well, my background is in law. So I studied law and I used to teach law at university in Belfast. And a small correction, I went to university in Belfast, but I'm not from Belfast. I am from Northern Ireland.
Thank
I'm
you
from a small village in Northern Ireland called Ardglass. So Belfast is the place where I studied. And so I used to teach European law, European environmental law, company law on computers.
Nice.
A very long time ago, in a previous life. And so the interest in Greek arose through law because I had a colleague and we were doing some research together on comparing environmental law in the different ends of the European community as it was then. It was even before the European Union came into existence. And at some point she said, I cannot translate everything for you. You need to learn some Greek. So I did. And then I became quite ill at some point and I had to stop teaching for a while. And I went to Greece and I was feeling much better in Greece. So I decided, okay, since I feel okay here, I'll stay. And then I switched to translation. It just sort of happened naturally. Because I learned Greek very, very quickly. I didn't have maybe a year in total it took me to learn and become fluent in Greek.
Oh, congratulations.
I personally think it's an relatively easy language. If you have a couple of other European languages and you have English, especially if you have German, and you understand the grammatical complexities of German and Greek is relatively straightforward.
Okay, yeah, it's good to know. You know that looking at all these languages from Hungary, everything is so distant, so hard, and people who actually learn Hungarian coming from Italy, Greece, or England have all my admiration, because we have to go through this and we have an idea of how difficult this is to learn. So again, congratulations, and it seems that the fascination with languages and translation remains. And
Yes.
You could put both your backgrounds into good.
Yes. So my background in law is very, very useful in this sort of type of translations. I do a huge amount of stuff with people who are investing in Greece and they have to go through the entire environmental permitting process in order to set up a factory, to create a mine, build in an area where there may be some sensitive environmental issues. So the ability to know all the legal rules that apply there really, really helps with the translation process. It makes it so much easier. I think a lot of people struggle with legal translations because they don't understand the law, so they don't really understand the content of what they're translating and then how that would be conveyed in a different language.
Yeah, I can relate to that to some extent. I'm not a lawyer, but I have helped some people move abroad, and I don't know what it takes to understand not just the law but the entire environment in the target country that you are completely unfamiliar with, and you cannot assume similarities with your own.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you use this phrase like helping people understand.
Yep.
So one of the things that I've been involved with in recent years is a project with a friend of mine, a fellow translator who's also British. Well, he's half British, half Greek in this case. We decided that there had been some previous translations of, for example, the penal code, the criminal laws of Greece, or the civil code, but they were done a very, very long time ago and they were out of date and not very good quality. So our project was to translate all these core pieces of legislation into English so that Greek lawyers can better explain to their foreign clients what the Greek law actually says in language that someone who is from England or America or Australia or Ireland will be able to understand. The words might be slightly different in each jurisdiction, but they will be able to explain relatively well. So the understanding part is what's really important there. And then we also translated the Code of Criminal Procedure and the Code of Civil Procedure because they had never been translated before.
Right.
And so some of them have already been published and the others are on the verge of being published.
Oh, that's quite an achievement. And I remember that when Hungary was acceding to the EU before 2004, and I was part of the technical staff who were taking care of the translation of the legal legislative body of the legal body of the EU, the acquis communautaire, into Hungarian. That was I was involved with the maintenance of the terminology database that come with that, and I remember how hard it was at times to actually make the connection between the Hungarian legal language and the Hungarian legal concepts and the ones that existed in the
because
EU legislation.
EU law is conceived as a separate body of law with its own terminology, so that interface between the two can be very, very complicated. I have lots of experience in that area as well, like especially when Cyprus joined the European Union. All their legislation had to be translated as well, so I was deeply involved in translating a lot of the legislation at that time.
So I can imagine some of that. Thank you. But right now, because we have the conference of Fit Europe here in Budapest. Your profile also says that you're the chair of Fit Europe. Not that I didn't know it, because I did. Can you introduce Fit and Fit Europe to the audience? So we are speaking to people who don't necessarily come from the translation community, don't necessarily come from Europe, are not necessarily familiar with our profession, and this is one of the reasons we are having this conversation here to make a bit of noise for our profession to a wide variety of people. So yes, I'm asking you to introduce Fit and Fit Europe to the audience, and can you talk about where you see its role in today's world of translation and interpretation, and what are Fit's main pursuits and achievements that you are proud of or you think are important?
Okay, that's a complicated question.
It is. All questions are.
So Fit is the International Federation of Translators. The abbreviation Fit is from the French name of the federation, because it was originally founded in France about more than 70 years ago now. It consists of around 100 national or subnational translation associations. So you, for example, in a large country like Germany, you have like BDU, which is the German Association of Translators, but then you also have like a smaller, like the North Western Association of German Translators, and so that's why I say subnational as well. And then, so that's a global level Fit. We call it Fit International or sometimes Fit Mundus. And then within the federation, there are these like subunits called regional centers. So we have one for Europe, which is the largest. We have around 77 member associations or members with some of our associations, some are universities. We have this class of members called associate members. And then you have one regional center in North America and one in Latin America. And then recently one was set up in Africa, and only this year one was set up in Asia. So we basically covered all the continents now with regional centers. In terms of what FIT does, its primary purpose is to promote the interests of translators and interpreters around the world. The tagline of the Federation, if you want to call it that, is the voice of interpreters and translators and terminologists, because they're included in the mix as well. And this promotion is done through various things. So, for example, visibility campaigns, raising awareness, speaking to ministries, to governmental organizations, speaking to organizations like GALA that you've been involved in, or the European Union Association of Translation Companies, or similar organizations in different continents, holding conferences, holding webinars, different types of events, try to raise awareness. The Federation also has a whole series of standing committees that work on specific topics. For example, there's one about copyright and protecting the rights of translators when they have translated like a book, for example. How does that get protected? Or there's one which has recently been set up on AI. There's a whole series of them, one about human rights, like how does translation and interpreting operate in the sphere of human rights, those sort of things. So the Federation is very, very busy. And then what we do at Fit Europe is promote the interests of translators, interpreters, and terminologists within Europe. So we cover specific European topics that it's more appropriate for us to address at the European level rather than the global level. So it's somehow inspired by this strange European concept of subsidiarity. What is the best level at which to do something? So the regional centers address topics which are best dealt with at a regional level. So, for example, when GDPR came out, the General Data Protection Regulation, we realized, that translators and interpreters are handling huge amounts of personal data, but there wasn't any clarity around how they should be handling this and what procedures they need to follow. So we worked at Fit Europe level very closely with the European Commission, with the European Union Association of Translation Companies, and we prepared a whole series of guidelines for translators and interpreters, like to explain, are they covered by the regulation? What are their obligations? What should they be doing? We created like a whole series of like flowcharts for questions they should be asking themselves. So we try to produce like practical, useful guidelines for individual translators and interpreters. And then we had like a very large event to launch those guidelines, which was funded by the European Commission as a Translating Europe workshop.
Thank you. This is something that I'm very interested in. I would be able to conduct an entire interview with you about GDPR and how you implement it in as a technology provider. But for now, because I have other questions for this conversation, we should make sure to include a link to all these things that are referenced in the description of this video, so that the audience can look them up later on. So I will restrain myself and save the conversation about GDPR and data protection for some other time. But I want to ask about the conference that is on the way, because it was really low profile amidst all the other events that we were attending throughout the autumn, and I don't think it deserved to be so low profile. So this conference of Fit Europe is happening during these days at the Department of Translation and Interpreting at Delft University. I will be with you tomorrow, and this will be a huge nostalgia for me, because I used to teach there.
Yes.
what are the main topics and goals of this conference?
So the title of the conference is Fit for Market, Thriving in the Age of AI. And what we're trying to do in the conference is to take different perspectives. So what is the role of associations of translators and interpreters in this changing environment, and how can they contribute, and what is their input, what are their concerns, how can these be addressed? Then the other side we're looking at is industry, which is the side that you represent, and we're very grateful for you speaking at the conference tomorrow. And then the other side is academia, right, and the training of students and things like this. So it's a mixture of these different perspectives, because normally you have, for example, you might have academia with industry on its own, but you don't really have the professional associations and their role in this mixture. And so we're trying to address that.
Thank you. Can I ask something that was not in the script, but it came to me when I was listening to you? Translators and interpreters and their associations don't exist in a vacuum, just like our translation technology industry doesn't exist in a vacuum. So I want to ask about, and I know this is a complex question, but there is this constellation of translators and interpreters and translation companies or agencies and translation buyers that we sometimes call clients, plus the academia. And this is what makes up the galaxy that we are talking about. So how do you see Fit Europe's role in that, and what would you consider as the big successes in that constellation when you try to navigate among associations and among the various stakeholders with translation companies and translation buyers? Because what keeps happening at various events is that always there is some kind of elephant in the room. So this is why I don't want to skip that. Yes. skip that complex relationship among all the stakeholders. Yes.
Yes, and so I think the primary role, especially in the last 10 years of associations, has been to try and talk about this elephant and to try and explain the concerns of translators and interpreters around this topic of money, because that's what the elephant is.
Most of the time, yes.
Most of the time, yes. And also money in relation to technology and how the increasing use of technology is affecting earning potential among the freelancers. That's basically what the elephant is. It's always what comes up from all the conferences. But the associations can understand what concerns and what worries translators, because this wasn't really happening in the past. The sides were like separate and they weren't around the same table. And so one of the main things that Fit Europe in particular has been doing has been trying to participate in forums and events and get itself at that table and speak about these concerns. And I think because we are both together in this language industry expert group, and you know from our interactions within that, I constantly bring up this topic and discuss it. And we also see, for example, in the really, really major event Translating Europe Forum that takes place every year in Brussels, which is organized by the European Commission, we have some input into that. And in the past, Translating Europe Forum was very focused on technology. And now in recent years, we see a shift that there's a more balanced perspective. It's like technology and the human factor, that humans still remain important. Pay and this whole issue of money has started to be discussed. I think a lot of freelancers would want it to be discussed much more, but it's a gradual discussion, like all these things always are. You know, you can't just occupy the entire space with that topic. You gradually start discussing these with the other people, and a debate and a discussion and a consensus around these topics emerges, and some changes can be made. For example, last year, Translating Europe Forum, one of the big topics that we were able to discuss was collective bargaining. And for example, in Hungary, you have this partnership between translation associations, translation agency, and translation agency associations, and they have come together to make the conditions better in the market. And so we discussed this at European level and gave other examples from other countries as well. And so these issues around working conditions and conditions of pay, which are very, very important from the freelancer perspective, need to be openly discussed in these forums rather than just left to the side and ignored. And I think that has changed in recent years. So I think the Federation can be very proud about making that change.
I agree with you. And thank you very much for this. So I'd like to return to one of the topics that you are passionate about, and this is the education of translators and interpreters, and that's something that you yourself brought up earlier in one of your answers. And I know that you and many of us are also passionate about the education of the general public about our profession. The expert group where we work together, you also mentioned that this language industry expert group next to the Directorate General of Translation and the EC. There we had a campaign last year that at least parts of which you spearheaded. Because what we have seen is that fewer and fewer young people choose to learn about translation and interpreting. And this is quite concerning. So tell us what the biggest concern around this is, and what this campaign was about, and how we move on with that.
Well, the biggest concern, I think, for freelance associations and for translation agencies and translation buyers and large organizations like the European Commission is that people aren't studying translation or interpreting anymore, that there won't be a next generation. I think the consensus now among all sides is that humans are still needed. The technology is, okay, it's advancing, but it's still not there. It's not replacing us. It's a tool that we're using. And so we need people to come along and study so that there is a constant supply of translators. For example, we learned recently that the European Commission is launching calls to recruit quite large numbers of permanent translators. They themselves see that they will still need human translators. So, and the reason why we decided to start this campaign is because now for a series of years in something called the European Language Industry Survey, which I am deeply involved in running, we see a decline in the number of student registrations. It's not the same in all countries and at all universities, but the overall trend is a drop in registrations. And so the idea was that, what can we do about this? We had a series of 4 workshops where we brainstormed around these topics. Again, it was a partnership between all the sides of the industry. So it was freelancers, it was translation agencies, it was translation buyers, it was the European institutions, people from all these different perspectives coming together and brainstorming their ideas. And so we decided that what we would do is create a series of guides, one for young people, and the sort of questions that they would have, like, is there a future in translation? What does it actually mean to be a translator? What sort of things can I do? And so we created the guide specifically for them. And interestingly, we wrote it in a language which is more focused or tuned to younger people so that they're likely to be more receptive to it. And then we wrote a separate guide for their parents and a separate one for their teachers, because they're likely to say, Mom and Dad, I want to study translation. And so the parents will need to know what to say to their kids, and also likely to ask their teachers, especially in the career guidance subject in school or the workshops that they have around career guidance. Like, if I pursue this career, what does it mean? What will it involve? And so it's to give the information to the teachers. So the information in the 3 guides is pretty much the same information, but it's presented from different perspectives and tailored to the different roles and the different types of questions that these people will be asked to answer to. And so we have produced these 3 guides, and now we're in the process of how are we going to get them translated into the various European languages and also localized into the languages, because the way it's written in English is probably not an appropriate. You can't just translate it word for word. into Greek. It will have to be localized for Greek. It will have to be localized for Portuguese. It will have to be localized for Hungarian. And so we're trying to figure out how that's going, because there's no point having them just in English. They need to be in all the European languages so that they're useful for a very large number of people.
Thank you. Yeah, just to share an anecdote from one of the conversations that we had last year, that you had this ad hoc kind of survey among youngsters who, and it turned out that most of them think that the translator is a machine.
Yes. So what I did was I asked a whole series of primary school children in various European countries, like, to draw a picture of a translator or an interpreter, or to write a sentence if they could write a sentence. And then I did the same thing for people who were at secondary school. And as you said, the majority of kids in different European countries, in the pictures that they were drawing, thought that translator or interpreter was some sort of machine. But as they got older, that sort of changed. They started to realize that it's actually a person, and it's a profession. But so the problem starts early on. Somehow, probably exposure to technology, maybe the images they see on television or in cartoons or whatever, they think that translation or interpreting is something mediated through a machine, or it's done by a machine, and it's not a human process. And then that sort of shifts over time.
Yeah, we have seen this, and also we absolutely need the information for the parents, because we don't want the parents to say to the kids that don't even think of it, because you won't find a job, or you won't be able to have a career in translation. And you and I know that they will be able to. Maybe the nature of the work will be different. Maybe the entire profession and the working conditions will make much more use of the technologies that are available. This is probably inevitable, but it will still be with people, human translators in the cockpit. As a keynote speech said, that translation.
I started translating about 30 years ago now, maybe between 25 and 30 years ago. It's completely different now than it was then. It changes. It's always been changing through the role of technology. So it's not surprising what you're saying, that it will change. It is changing at the moment as we speak, and it will change in the future. This is part of the nature of the profession.
Yes, I still have seen my dad translate by hand or on a typewriter, and having huge piles of dictionaries around him, but that's no longer the case. Even he is using various forms of technology now, when he translates at the age of 83. So, and this leads me to this a wider question: how do you see the future of the profession? I know we said a number of things about this, and this campaign that we were talking about is very much related to this. But I have to ask you if you yourself have encouraging words to young people who are interested in languages but hesitate to train to be a translator. I know that we have the information materials, but coming from a real life person is much stronger. So I want this conversation to be one of the vehicles to convey this message.
Yeah. Well, before I go on to that point,
absolutely.
The campaign is not just the guides. There's a whole series of other actions that we were still trying to take. For example, there's a social media aspect to it, of like young professionals in particular sharing their experience, trying to encourage people who are younger than them to get into the profession. I think if you had asked me that question 1 year ago, I might have been a little bit more pessimistic, but 1 year now down the line, having attended either in person or online quite a lot of translation conferences, I think we can see a clear shift, that there is more optimism among all sides about the continuing importance of the human in the translation process. This is possibly because people start to see generally like the limitations of AI, that it's a bit overhyped, that people say it can do things that can't actually do those things yet. For example, at Translating Europe Forum, we had like a youth panel. We had some examples of people who were in their early 20s or early 30s who are building very, very successful careers in translation, and other people can surely do the same. We see lots of older professionals still continuing to do very, very well. What we increasingly hear anecdotally, and we've asked about this in the 2025 version of ELIS, so we'll have hard data in around March time when we present the results, is this idea that people are shifting back to more traditional forms of translation. They've tested AI tools, and they see that it's not really working for them because they actually care about their brand, or they care about their image, or they care about the quality of the text, or they actually want to understand what it says and not vaguely what it says, or it's a legal document and they really need to know precisely what it says. And so they're moving away from, okay, we can just do it with AI and for free, to actually, we actually need it to be done properly and professionally by a human. We need someone who can say, yes, this is actually what it says, and this is conveying the message correctly, and this is getting it right for us. So hopefully, if you ask me again in 6 months, we will have like some concrete data about that. But anecdotally, I see that, and I hear it all the time, that this is happening. I see it myself with my own clients as well, that for a while they said, okay, well, it's a bit expensive, maybe we'll try and do it in-house ourselves. And then 2 weeks later, a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, knock, knock, John, can you do all these complicated legal documents for us in the way that you know best how to do them?
Yes, we have a similar experience, I have to say, but you mentioned that most of the information that we have is anecdotal. Of course it is, because it's a field that is changing so rapidly that it's really hard to, there is simply no time to conduct any kind of meticulous research and come to verifiable, repeatable experiments and database on them. So we will have to stay for a few months with the anecdotal information. But we have the same experience. To add a bit of color to that, we also see a wide variety of people and companies making all kinds of choices. So there we have seen some large customers making choices like, okay, we translate everything with AI from this day forth, with interns, occasionally post-editing, and this is a change that most people who bought into the hype made like 2 years ago. Some people still make these changes, make these choices. So as I would say, and this was accentuated very much with the fog that I experienced when I was driving into Brussels earlier this month to actually go to the Translating Europe Forum, is that the fog, the mist is clearing up, but some of it is still there.
Yes, for sure.
And we have a responsibility of
yeah, and I start to see as well, again, anecdotally, a lot more professional translators are speaking out and sending out a clear message about what the role of a professional translator is, how a professional translator can help you to try and demystify things for clients, to clear this fog, to clear away the hype. So this is, you see it like if you follow, for example, on Facebook or on LinkedIn, on the social media, you see more and more people speaking out. And we also see it now in the Federation as well, that it's producing more position papers on these topics. For example, there was a recent one which was published about AI, because certain governments are discussing the idea of using AI tools in court interpreting or in asylum interpreting settings without any human mediation whatsoever. This is extremely risky.
Yes.
And so the Federation has been making its voice heard in relation to that. And also in the UK, there's been a public inquiry which was launched about the state of court interpreting. And so the Federation submitted evidence for this. Fit Europe, the regional centre, also submitted evidence for this. The national associations in the UK submitted evidence for this. Some of the people who actually wrote those documents were then invited to go in front of the House of Lords and to express their views. Again, they also invited people from the technology provider side as well to interview them about the claims they're making, that these systems will work fine and they won't cause any problems. So there is this increasing outpouring of advice and discussion and debate about these topics, especially on the freelancer side.
Yes, and not only do we see more people speaking out, but we also, or at least this is my experience, that people are getting better and better educated about how these systems work and what they can do and what they cannot do. And this is a welcome change, because it makes it easier for technology providers to talk about these systems and to give advice to various organizations and people who want to implement them in a level or another. So thank you for that, and thank you for bringing that into the discussion. We are this conversation is drawing to a close, but like we started it with you, and I would like to finish this again with you. And what I wanted to ask is, and I pretty much do that to every guest of mine. What I wanted to ask is what your aspirations are. Where do you want to get? What are you dreaming of learning? Because my experience says that it does one very good to learn a new profession every now and then. So, is there anything among your ambitions, about your aspirations, that you want to talk about, that you find interesting and that you're passionate about?
Well, what I need to learn is how to build some sort of database. So because these books that I talked about, the ones that I translated with my colleague, the criminal code, the civil code, we want to create this as a database so when the law gets updated, we update the translation and lawyers can access it. I don't have that technical knowledge, but it's something that I want to learn how to do. And the other thing that I want to learn, because you framed the question around learning objectives.
Yes, this is one of the this is one of the safer areas. I'm not asking personal questions, but learning about the guest's aspirations is also inspiring.
I also
to the
want
audience.
to learn
what is behind
the Irish language. Okay, when I was at primary school and for quite a few years at secondary school, we learned Irish, but we didn't actually learn it because I grew up in the north of Ireland. And I come from a Catholic background. You're supposed to learn Irish to help you feel more Irish, but you don't actually learn to use it as a living, working language. But I've always loved the Irish language. My father grew up speaking and learning Irish, but then he never spoke Irish with us, so it wasn't passed down. And I would like to learn it as I get older. I read more books about Irish and the Irish language, and I follow lots of documentaries about it and things like this. So if and when I find the time, I would like to learn it. The interesting thing is that there are now more people learning Irish all around the world than there are on the entire island of Ireland. And this is thanks to technological solutions like Duolingo. So you have millions of people all around the world currently learning the Irish language through this thing. And there are only 3.5 million people in the Republic of Ireland. And there are more learners of Irish than there are people in Ireland. So maybe I'll use Duolingo. I sort of learned Italian to a quite good level using Duolingo during the during COVID and the pandemic. It can be quite useful, but then Irish is probably on a similar level of difficultness and difficulty as Hungarian. What you see is not what you pronounce.
Yes, although I'm not 100% sure about the grammar, but yes.
Yes, they're both complicated languages, yes. But it's something I would like to learn.
I wish you the best of luck. I don't like this because it's not necessarily luck, but this is what you say in English. But I wish you every success with that. I know exactly one Hungarian person who speaks fluent Irish.
Ooh.
And he was, when we were touring Ireland in the late 90s, he was there. And we were able to rent bicycles in a place where they didn't really speak English. That was the west of Ireland, some islands off the coast, Aran Islands off the coast of Galway. So that was a very interesting experience, and his skills were and still are very impressive. So again, I'd like to wish you every success with these endeavors, because I know how inspiring and refreshing it is to jump into delve into something different to what you have been doing so far. And with that, I would like to thank you for being with me in memoQ Talks, and I wish you and Fit Europe also every success with the conference today and tomorrow, and also with the future endeavors, because there's a lot of work that you need to do. There's a lot of work that we together need to do, and I'm looking forward to working with you more in the future about this. Thank you very much,
Balázs, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to continuing working with you as well. It's always been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for coming, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.